Hi everyone, this is my revised video of Edward Bear, next in the Canadian series. And this is revised because I did a previous video that I hadn't uploaded yet on Edward Bear. And I was informed by, I guess I'm a Spud boy, of a very interesting story that I'll relate to you later on in the video. And so I wanted to revise this one to include that great story that I've been just told about. And this is Edward Bear, Toronto band, late 60s, early 70s, and they had kind of a two-part career. In 1969, this is their first album called Bearings, and they were a three-piece band, kind of pop, but with a hard edge, some blues and a touch of psych in their style and their music and stuff. And apparently they were signed to Capitol in 1969. This is supposedly the first Canadian band to have been signed based on an album, not based on a single, without having a previous single or hit single. They were signed on an album basis, although a big hit single did come out of this album, a song called You, Me, and Mexico, and it was written by Larry Evoy. These are the three members of the band. On the first two albums, they were a three-piece. We had Larry Evoy, who was drummer and vocalist, Paul Weldon, who is keyboards, and Danny Marks, who was a guitar player. And here's the inside jacket. It's a picture of the band in the studio by the looks of it. There's liner notes by the great Richie York, who was a writer, continues I think to be a rock writer, but he was in Toronto writing for Billboard magazine and many other publications in the late 60s and early 70s. And You, Me, and Mexico became a big hit in early 1970. It was almost like a power pop song, although it had Tijuana brass style horn section into it. It's very well produced, just an excellent Canadian recording. And 1970, second album, Edward Bear. It's called Eclipse, and I don't know if you can see it, but very, very faintly here, the cover is a bit worn. It says Eclipse here in faint writing here. This cover was designed by Paul Weldon, the organist, who is a graphic artist. It's another gatefold cover. Pictures of the band. Still a three-piece. There was a single called You Can't Deny It, which was very hard-edged, lots of guitar in it. And it's a great song too, but it wasn't as big a hit as You, Me, and Mexico. And then they went through personnel changes. This is the third Edward Bear album, 1971, 72. It's Canadian Capitol. Cover again, designed by Paul Weldon. Now Paul Weldon left the band, and he's a graphic artist, and designed record covers for other bands, including the first Rush album. The cover of the first Rush album was a Paul Weldon designed. I think he might have done some Stampeders albums here in Canada, and even I think a Parliament Funkadelic album cover at one time. And Danny Marks also left the band. So with the first two albums you had that hard edge in many of the tracks, and they lost that. They became a pop band, as were many bands in the early 1970s. They enjoyed great pop success with a song on this album called Last Song. Also, there were hits Fly Across the Sea and Masquerade. Last Song was a big hit in the United States, but as I said, it was a very much of a pop sound. Larry Evoy had a fairly high voice, not as high as Frankie Valli or Brian Wilson, but it was kind of a high plaintive voice, very appealing to the pop crowd. It's kind of music that would suit well on a K-Tel album or something. And they recorded one more album after this called Close Your Eyes. It too was a pop album. Larry Evoy then had a brief solo career, and Edward Bear just fizzled out. But they did enjoy many hits here in Canada, many pop hits here in Canada, and that's basically the story of Edward Bear as a rock pop band. Except 1969, we go back. Here's their first album. There was this other band that kind of came out in 1969. They were called Led Zeppelin. And I think people know Led Zeppelin. The Led Zeppelin played in Toronto 3 times in 1969. Edward Bear was the opening act for the last 2 concerts, Toronto concerts in 1969. The first time Zeppelin came through was in February 1969, right after the release of the first Zeppelin album. And they played the Rock Pile, which is also the Masonic Hall in Toronto, just on Yonge Street, north of Bloor. And they were assigned to do a second show in August of 1969, where Edward Bear was the opening act. And those were the days when bands would only play for like 45 minutes or an hour or something. So they actually had 2 shows, and both bands on 2 shows between the shows. I think there might have been multiple bands, Canadian bands opening for Zeppelin. But now this is the veracity of the story is you know in question. It's just what I've read. But when Zeppelin played in August of 1970, apparently before the second show, Peter Grant went to the promoters, who I think was John Brower and Associates, and demanded more money, because by August of 1969, Zeppelin were kind of on their way. They could command more money. And they said they weren't going to play unless they got paid more money for the second show or something. And one of the people, maybe that worked for the promoters, actually went outside and disabled Led Zeppelin's equipment truck. And they went back in and said, well, if Zeppelins aren't going to play, you're not going to get your equipment truck, and you're stuck here, basically. And they worked out some kind of deal. So Zeppelin did go on to play that evening, played the second show, and all was well. But it was just one of those things. And Edward Bear opened for that show. Zeppelin came through again at the release of Zeppelin 2. It was November of 1969. Edward Bear again opened the show, and this was at O'Keefe Centre at Yonge Street, front and Yonge Street in Toronto, which was one of the major, and continues to be one of the major venues for people, bands coming through Toronto, smaller bands at least, but it's also home, or it was home for the ballet and the opera and all kinds of people like that. And apparently in the sound check in the afternoon there were 2 shows. There was a sound check. Robert Plant went and took one of Jimmy Page's Les Pauls, went and plugged into the amp, and just started wailing on it. Started playing the guitar at full loudness and stuff. Danny Marks, the guitar player for Edward Bear, went over to Robert Plant and turned the guitar off. And Plant was not amused. Plant basically said, "You can't do that. Don't touch my guitar. Don't touch this guitar. It's our equipment." And Danny Marks said to him, "Don't play through my guitar amp." And they exchanged. There was quite an exchange of words, and well, the show did go on, and apparently that night Edward Bear basically blew Led Zeppelin off the stage. And you know, this is folklore now, I suppose, but as we all know, Edward Bear went on to become just a fantastic band, famous around the world, loved by millions and millions of fans. Led Zeppelin just drifted off into obscurity. But those are interesting stories. And thank you for Guess I'm a Spud Boy for letting me know about that incident in November of 1969. Thanks for watching, everyone.